Hello, this will be part 29 in the series, An Ancient Legacy, and sticking with Beauvais Cathedral. Previous, we just had a look through in regards to the medieval royal foot, how that connects to the Old Kingdom, Royal Egyptian cubit defining the pyramid, these very important numbers being connected through these systems of measurement. But the importance, so medieval royal feet, well, it's 144 feet high, and this is relatively important. But if we go back, these ancient sites I was looking into, so for instance, Boscawen Un, 72 feet, that's one half of 144. Boscawen, let's get that in screen. Okay, so Boscawen has the same dimensions again, 72 feet being half of 144. The Ashura stones in Japan, 72 feet, one half 44. Standing stones of Stennes, the platform itself, 144 feet, and also the width of the avenue at Thornborough. And there are other examples went through, throughout this series, and how these base units seem to be popping up now. Question is, well, the origins, okay, that will probably always be, but when we move up to a more recent period, we start to be able to make more of describe it a little bit better, in that we know that they had certain levels and certain interest of knowledge in certain things: astronomy, geometry, arithmetic. The quadrivium, for instance, Chartres Cathedral, that literally has the seven liberal arts, including Euclid and Pythagoras, featured on the carving. So we can be quite sure. And we also know it was the beginning of a very rapid expansion of knowledge in this part of the world. And why are these numbers so off? Well, obviously they're part of the plan. Now, so, for instance, St Andrew's Cathedral here in Sydney by Edmund Blackett, famed Gothic architect as well, but we see 144 medieval royal feet long. It's exactly the same length as the height of the interior there at Beauvais. But also the transepts, so they're 14 feet, which is 144 Cremona inches, or 12 Cremona feet times 12, 144. But St Peter's Cathedral, with even strong Masonic connections in Adelaide here in Australia, 168 feet high. That's the same width as the White House. All of these measures I'm talking about, I'll mention some cathedrals here, but you can apply them to any of the great cities, especially Washington, Canberra, Brasilia, and Astana, these very esoteric cities. But 144 Cremona feet is 168 feet. So even though it's not 148 feet, this cathedral is incorporating that same method, and the use of this Cremona feet has been something that I've gone on quite a bit about. Mallorca, Palma Cathedral in Spain, in Mallorca, so the feet, 144 English feet. Now again, that brings the question, when did this so-called modern English foot arise? Well, we see it in the Salama stone at no less than 2,500 years old, and throughout these very important monuments and memorials from antiquity through this period just keep incorporating these same proportions. Now at some point, either this is very, very ancient, or an ancient unit was converted into this so-called modern English foot. But in a random world, these things would not happen, and it's quite clear it's part of a pattern. Now, Basilica of the Sacred Sagrada Familia, the 7th of the 11th, it was consecrated. Now, how often it happens on the 7th of the 11th, 7/11, that's an interesting thing. Certain people like to use that day to inaugurate found towns and that type of stuff. But at 556 feet, that's 1440 Cremona hands. So again, we have a 56 feet. Well, unless you consider Cremona hands, you got 1440. But what's also interesting is, because whether it's a building, now these buildings are different, because this is like, now we think in a different way. If a skyscraper's not up in a couple of years, it's really freaking people out. But when they were building these cathedrals, when they were building the pyramids, they were working on a different time scale. and these economic factors that drive us forward and drive our systems of construction forward just didn't apply. The economy was quite different at that time, the way society was structured. But it's just because whether it's Canberra or Washington, both of them have a pentagonal shaped defence HQ, but it was built many decades after the city was finished. It was part of the growing maturity of the city, as where you'll see the same thing in Astana and Brasilia as they develop. But it shows it's also talking that these designers, the people involved in this, are playing a long game. They're looking at it quite differently. And for instance, 144 years from the groundbreaking to the scheduled date of completion. Now, if it's completed a year early or a year late, that's going to go out the window, but I do think it's worth mentioning that this is part of this, not only 144 as a measurement of linear measurement, but also as a time measurement, because these things all do bleed into one another. Amiens Cathedral, completed 1270, 144 Roman feet. So again, they incorporated this very important number, 144, but they used a different measurement, and they used a slightly different measurement so that they could still have a 144 feet high cathedral at Amiens, but they achieved it with less effort by using a slightly less unit of measure. But that's also important to defining the rest of these buildings, as I pointed out in Beauvais in the last episode. Christchurch Cathedral, Oxford, England, 1160 to 1200. And again, 144 feet spire. You'll still see it continue like in relatively new here in Poland. So old is what's new again. Older church again, Holy Trinity in Hull. Brand new, modern type architecture. Still, the design changes. The building materials change, construction techniques change, but some things never change, and it's 144. This is Rizal was an interesting figure. Philippines independence. He was a Mason against American Masons. So again, but what's interesting is also this organization which developed from him, and it was a mutual aid organization with the same esoteric Freemasonic Oddfellow symbolism. But the original church, and there's been some rebuilding, but at 36 feet high, that's 144 palms, 144 feet long, 48 feet wide, that's 144 hands. So again, the whole structure resonates with this very important number. Peterborough Cathedral, again, now you also find it in important monuments, memorials, across the world, really. It's plenty of them. But those are just some examples of why 144 in this type of architecture just has to be included. It might also include the number of windows, a number of pews. There will be at certain levels of it, but they'll always include this particular measurement because of many other factors, also what emerges for it. For instance, 1 foot is 12 inches, and from there we start to get a picture, because so again we have ancient systems like grains, Roman measure systems, but also description of the sun. Now the long foot, 1.056 feet, that's also the Persian foot. So we have a harmony point where the various measures of sun, earth and moon will harmonize around this very particular scale. And this is just because of the set in ratios of inches per feet, feet per yard. You will, once you start at a harmonic, all the rest will flow from it. But it's still interesting because, for instance, 1728, that's 12 cubed. Now sun and moon, we see them like chains. That's 66 feet is one chain. Long palm again, so Persian scale. But New Jerusalem and the Ark of Utnapishtim. The Ark of Utnapishtim goes back to these ancient Sumerian writings about the flood, and the Ark was a cube of 120 by 120 by 120 cubits. So the 1728 and New Jerusalem. Now these are very important because in both the dimensions of the King James version of New Jerusalem and the Sumerian / Indus measures, we get this beautiful harmony, multiple sets of measurements coming to these multiple harmonic numbers. Very lovely. You also see it in the Yugas, 1728, 1,728,000 years. Nice sort of number also in maths as well, but like 576 screen resolution, 24 squared, again the sun, but also the Mayan calendar counts. So we see the Yuga, we see Mayan calendar counts which will recur. So again, the Yuga at 432, both the larger cycle and the Kali Yuga. 432,000 degrees being one of these deciding angles of the vesica, A4320. Again, New Jerusalem and the Ark of Utnapishtim, as well as ancient Roman scales, and bringing us back to the sun. Now, the radius of the sun, mean radius, is 432,000 miles. So, just as a pointer, but G, 192 hertz, but also 432 and 192. You see how musical scales will also tend to harmonize around these measures. And also Mayan, but also the Yugas will have significance there. But 144, very cool number, both the sun and the moon, but also 1440 minutes per day. Ancient weight scales, still up to now in screen resolution, and here in Australia, even the way that they've set up the AM band to bring us always to these very beautiful, lovely numbers which run along here. So astronomy, timekeeping, weights, and still to the electronic age in geometry, it's again this beautiful sort of pops up, at these very important constructions based on the 360-degree compass, with the origins of which is murky, but pretty solid to say 2,000 years old, probably older than that, but we have some, that it's still quite old, lots of evidence to suggest that's even older than that, but the Octahedron, 1440 degrees, which is 8 equilateral triangles, but you add up the platonic solids together, 14,400. So in geometry, it's very cool, including in the Fibonacci sequence, and it's the 12 Fibonacci, but it's also 12 squared, which is a nice indicator, but also 3, 4, 5. So across the first, second, third dimension, 144. You add sixth in the fourth dimension, you get 1440. Also, the shortest math paper, or one of them ever written, was on the sum of like powers, but 144 to the fifth, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth dimension, I think, is pleasant little coincidences. So the Yugas, Mayan calendar counts Rosicrucians, 144 octaves, 144 elements by their teaching, and Ark of Utnapishtim, 1440, New Jerusalem, both the walls of New Jerusalem, 144 cubits, but there are also other connections in there. But it's throughout the Bibles, for instance, the 12 tribes, 144,000 each, so 144,000. So across time, across cultures, across the world, these numbers do pop up in these very important myths and these very important structures. 96 deep, like dots per printing, 48 again, Ark of Utnapishtim, New Jerusalem, in both the Yugas and Buddhism as well, 48 days under the Bodhi tree, also 480 grains, so the troy ounce, it's where we measure silver and gold. It's a nice reference there as well. And 24, again, arithmetic in geometry, the vesica, but it's also knuckles per hand, 24 hours a day. 2,400,000 long rods would describe the Earth, and 24 letters in the Greek alphabet. So just as a quick indicator, because it's not just in cathedrals, you'll see it in all these ancient structures that are, so often, even so often it's almost the exceptions to the rules is some examples I previously thought were exceptions in a couple of years ago actually just turned out to be I was using the wrong unit of measure. There's these very small units, a handful of units of measure, which will connect all of these sites, but also each of these sites will have a crossover point, so it's a harmony, a unity point between multiple sets of measure. But for the moment, sticking on the significance of 144 and all that comes with it, and how these scalings based on this imperial system actually is pointing to the quadrivium. And again, a good I think it's an excellent set education method, because again, with this small set of numbers, you begin to incorporate so much important stuff: music, geometry, arithmetic, and astronomy. And so that's one of the reasons. Now, when it actually did become solid, applicable rather than a set of coincidences, that's going to be lost in time, probably, because there has been peaks and troughs points when it's sort of come almost popular and then gone down again. But that's all for another story. It's a longer history. And anyway, so there's some more on Beauvais and the importance of these particular units and the systems of measurement. And with that one, hope you enjoyed and have a good one.